Good afternoon. This is Animal Uncontrol. Welcome to the voice chat. So far, I have Alien joining me. Couple of items I'd like to talk about real briefly first. One is I'm considering switching these voice chats to either Skype or Teams. The Discord is not the best way to do this, I'm finding. I use Skype and Teams quite a bit. I use Teams at work, and I use Skype in my personal life with family and friends, and I get pretty good results out of them. I think better than here, particularly the sharing capacities are a lot better. The sharing with the Discord is just not the greatest. So I'm considering that. Of course, the other advantage of that also is someone who can join who's not on the Discord, which also means that it might get kind of spicy, particularly if we get some dog people in there. Could get interesting. So far, it seems like everybody has a pretty good rapport, I would say. We're not attacking each other or anything like that. So that could, I think it would work. It would be better technically, and it might be more interesting. The other thing I'd like to do is give a couple of, or at least one shout out. I've been following, hold on, let me share. Yeah, let me do like the sharing options on here aren't the greatest. I want to share something real quick. And well, this is an interesting article here, but that's not what I was contemplating right now. This YouTube channel here, Animal Abuse in Hungary. This person has a lot of really good things to say. I just subscribed today. This is about inconsiderate, low IQ dog owners in Hungary who are treating their animals like a shit and keeping an entire country hostage. Yeah, well, welcome to the club. It's kind of like joining NATO, just sort of keep spreading this dog nuttery. So shout out to him. Folks should join. I'd like to see him get some more subs. I left a message on, or a comment on one of his videos, and it looks like it disappeared. I don't know who disappeared it. It's possible he did, because some people see my handle and they think that I'm the adversary, that I'm advocating for like a complete lack of animal control. No, really, my handle is just a comment on that. But in any case, this person has a lot of interesting things to say, and folks should join. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was we had a couple of dog bite related fatalities this week. I kind of wanted to get bad on the line because this is sort of reminiscent of his situation. What do we have there? I think we have, where is that? Yeah, this. This man, Don Gibson, he and his wife had 8 dogs on this property. You can see it's not exactly a vast estate or a large farm or any such thing. So they had 8 dogs on this property. If you look carefully, you can see they had sort of towards the left-hand side here. They have, it looks like some kind of steel box, a dog house. But look at the yard. I mean, I know it's winter and the ground is kind of brown and dry anyway. But look at how it's all dirt. And I've seen other pictures here. So basically the dogs have just completely destroyed this patch of land here. The 8 of them. In any case, this man he actually worked, I don't know if he owned, but he at least worked in a small hamburger restaurant. And he would take the dogs into the kitchen there, which is a gross violation of health codes.
That's what I was wondering about that picture, because it showed what looked like a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I believe he would take at least a couple of the dogs to work with him and keep them in the kitchen. So in any case, and if you get into this and read it, I don't know if I definitely need to go through all of it, but it really appears that his wife is more broken up over the loss of the dogs than the loss of him, even though she's still got believed the 2 dogs involved in the killing were euthanized, but she still has 6 dogs. Which even that many dogs is too many for a property like this. Most, communities limit the number of dogs in the home to, say, 5 or less. Usually it's about 4. Arguably to curb pack behavior. But yeah, these 2 were, neighborhood dog hoarders. And I'm sure this is one of those neighborhoods. I'm sure that this was just driving the neighbors nuts. Probably like with the barking, probably frequent dog at large. I'm sure if you dig into this, these dogs were a nuisance, only because it's literally impossible that they weren't.
There's also the smell from
The
them.
smell, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure
The yard's probably full of waste.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just like in Bad's neighborhood, his next door neighbor. It's like, yeah, when it warms up, yeah, the stench, and it's not just in the immediate vicinity either. It's like the barking. It just spreads out and permeates the entire neighborhood. It's disgusting, and that's why we've zoned out literally every other large animal. One reason, it goes back to, I want to maybe talk about BSL and those type of arrangements. But you can't have a front yard full of goats and sheep in a neighborhood like this typically. But when you have a yard full of 100-pound dogs, no problem. But one of the reasons we have these restrictions is for those kind of public health, public quality of life reasons. So you don't have what is literally a high density feedlot in a crowded suburb like this. And it raises the issue. And and it overlaps with the noise pollution issue also. Was like, what? If you give one group of people a pass on all these rules, really there are no rules. Like why zone out anything? If everybody can just have a yard full of large animals, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Same thing with the noise pollution. If you let dog people, shit all over the noise ordinances, why even have a noise ordinance? What's the point? So this is an interesting case. There was another one. There's another one in California where it was a protection dog that was housed by a business. Killed. I don't have that one up. Killed. I think somebody visiting the property. Let's see if I can find that one real quick. Yeah, actually, yeah. This one we were just looking at, the dog. It was a rescue dog, of course. It's all in how you raise them, but they don't know who raised them. So anyway, you also had this one: a man killed by dog. Visalia business. Occupational Safety and Health Agency responded. So this was another, quote, guard dog that, deleted somebody. Let me see if this was someone attacked and killed. Let's see. Victim's name. Entity had been in business, inside or outside. It doesn't say if the person was, there with permission or not. Probably not that it really matters too much because, again, it goes back to all these other restrictions. Booby trapping your property, in a way that would cause injury, is illegal as hell everywhere, regardless of means, with the one exception being, wait for it, ding, 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 a dog. Unbelievable. Let's see. Yeah, there's nothing there. It doesn't say. Not that it really matters too much. Like if they planted landmines in the property, and even if the person had been trespassing, prison. But you do it with a dog, and it's okay. Of course. So.
Yeah, so we're back to the moving the public opinion to where people, a normal person would question why anybody is adopting animals that are unwanted because of behavior. It's always going to be behavior, isn't it?
I mean,
And
often, yeah, yeah.
I guess you could say occasionally economic circumstance, but then why doesn't it go to a friend or relative?
Yeah, yeah.
I would think it would go to a shelter almost always because of behavior. But that's one thing. And there's the entitlement. Why are we allowing people to subject their neighborhoods to all of these problems from their dogs? The uh, as a society, we don't necessarily need to be so forgiving of dog owners, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, that's what we talked about last time. I mean, and this comes up often too, because often they'll deflect onto something else. Say, what about, that thing over there? But often what they're deflecting onto is a social good, right? Or some kind of useful activity. Like one thing that's big now is they're trying to, leaf blowers are being banned everywhere. I think it's sometimes partially it's because of air quality concerns. Really, it's because they're so loud. But literally,
Yeah.
seriously, does anybody listen to leaf blowers more than 5 or 10 minutes a week? No, and it's arguably a useful activity. It's people maintaining their property. Whereas a barky dog serves no purpose. Like there's no upside to it. So normally, yeah, you give people some leeway because you have folks, like if we're neighbors, like, yeah, I need to mow my lawn. You need to, blow the leaves off your lawn or do some tree work or whatever. So yeah, we cut each other some slack in that area. But the endlessly barking dog serves no purpose. All they're doing is converting dog food to noise. So really, there should be zero tolerance for it. None, because it's all downside, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we've noticed that the tolerance for dangerous dogs seems to have gone up, and obviously the tolerance for rescuing quote unquote dogs from shelters has gone way up. But what about the tolerance for barking? Is that something that has changed over time?
Um,
What if we took one of these barky dog households and put it back somewhere in time? Especially like you said, like the 8 dog household, that must have been really annoying to the neighbors.
oh yeah.
What if we put that back in time somewhere? I don't know, mid 70s or earlier.
Yeah, yeah, say, or like pre 1990. I think my observation, and it seems that many people have the same observation, was a crazy train really got underway late 90s, early 2000s, maybe, 20, 25 years ago. So you think, okay, say pre 1990. And it was a thing too. Is when I was growing up, I don't remember barky dogs being as much of a problem either. Right? I mean, I don't think that I changed or we changed. I think what happened was that the culture changed around us. Yeah, and I think there's been so I would say yes, there's been sort of a creeping, tolerance of that also, I believe.
And what about the trend of, I know that now a lot of people in apartments and condominiums feel entitled to own dogs, even though they don't have their own yard
Yep.
for a dog. So is that something that's changed over time?
I believe so also. I mean, it used to be, I mean, another aspect of this has changed is it used to be most apartments did not allow any pets. Not, or at
Yeah.
least not dogs. I mean, most apartments were pet free. Or they had very severe pet restrictions. And that's changed quite a bit also. It's interesting is that maybe you and I could do it, but I've always been wanting to do a piece, specifically on the evolution of, I'll call it, modern dog culture, post World War II, and how, having a dog became sort of part of the aspirational lifestyle. But the thing is like, okay, we know people like that. You know, there's many people, even some folks on the Discord, you know, they'll have family or friends who, you know, they see that having a dog is an aspirational thing, almost like somebody would, yeah, want to own a house or want a boat or something, right? And the thing is that they, back, you say in the 50s, you had that whole, or at post World War II, you had that whole kind of, you know, middle class suburban, you know, bourgeoisie aspirational lifestyle was not really pushed on people, and I'm not really opposed to it. I mean, I lived that way, but it was sort of presented to people, but it included the dog. So what did you have? You had the nuclear family, you know, mom, dad, two, three kids, you know, single family house, couple cars, and the dog. I was looking into this, and that was, you know, sort of presented as being, you know, that's the aspirational lifestyle. The thing was a difference. There's a couple of big differences, and you just pointed one of them out. Was that was sold as a package, right? It's a package deal. So what were parts of the package? Well, one was, you know, a single family standalone house on a piece of land, right, with a front and a backyard. So you had a yard for the dog. What you also had was, you know, most married women, at least middle class and up married women, pre 1980, were, you know, stay at home moms. They were housewives. So there was
Oh yeah.
somebody home to take, because part of the problem with dogs, not just in apartments but anywhere, is that the dog is left alone all day. And, you know, dogs are high maintenance animals. They need almost constant input from the owner. And that's one reason we have all this barking and these other dog related problems, is because, yeah, the dog is left alone all day in an apartment, or even, you know, tied up in the yard. There's nobody to essentially keep Fido company, because both, you know, parents, you know, both the husband and the wife or both partners work. And that's why I think we have all these problems. But the thing is that the dog is now being pushed as, you know, dog ownership is being pushed as an aspirational, you know, lifestyle all on its own. So regardless of whether, you know, you have a partner or somebody is at home or what type of home you have, you gotta get that dog, right? So
Yeah, I think I agree with that mostly. But if you look at one of the most popular shows from the 50s, Leave It to Beaver, what do we notice that's missing?
yeah, I never watched that show. I guess they did not
Well,
have a dog, or
there's no dog.
yeah.
It seems like there were a bunch of other 50s shows too that had no dog. Um, let's see, what was that show that Mary Tyler Moore was on, the Dick Van Dyke Show?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
I
there
mean,
was no dog there either.
it
There
wasn't
were
pushed.
there
Yeah,
were a lot of shows, even in the 70s, there were a lot of shows with no dog.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't pushed in every venue, but it often was. You know, it often was, and that was actually when they first started to popularize. You know, well, I guess it probably was popular before, but you had, you know, TV shows like Lassie and, you know, Rin Tin Tin and so forth that sort of, you know, glorified dogs. But yeah, I mean, back then, yeah, it wasn't pushed as hard. Or if it was sort of pushed as part of a package deal. But if you go back
Yeah.
and you look at a lot of, say, like, you know, magazine articles and stuff about it, and, you know, it's, you know, presented as, you know, part of that, you know, aspirational lifestyle. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't pushed as hard as it is now. Which always makes you wonder. It's like there's always something suspicious about the hard sale. And probably
Yeah, and
fewer.
back then the dog was not a replacement for children.
Yeah, yeah, or a
It was,
spouse.
yeah.
Well, yeah, the whole term, like, well, even, you know, people back there, like pre 1990 dog people, were not. I mean, they liked dogs, but they weren't crazy about them. It wasn't until, yeah, the past 20 or so years that you seem to be, again, it's like an arms race. they're all trying to outflank each other on who can love Fido the most. So who could love Fido more than somebody who loves the dog more than their spouse and their kids? You know, that's the dog owner of the year right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the kids have to come second.
Oh yeah.
If,
Absolutely.
if there are kids.
If there are
But, you know, a
kids.
lot of people are foregoing kids and just getting the dog, which is what IHD keeps pointing out.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes some of the child-free folks do it. They arguably for, environmental reasons. And I kind of doubt their sincerity on that, but whatever. But then they go and they get a dog, and it's like, okay, the dog is probably a bigger impact than a kid is. Plus, at least the kid most likely will grow up to do something useful. The dog won't. I mean, again, it goes back to what I was saying before. I guess, with children, there's trade-offs, right? There's trade-offs to be made there. But really with dogs, there isn't. Like, it's going to, be just a crap hound until the day it dies.
So another trend, was the rescue thing. I've talked to people who grew up on farms about that, but before it really exploded recently, when it was just starting to get going, and she agreed that it's completely insane to be adopting unwanted adult dogs. You should get it as a puppy if you're going to get a dog. It would be the perspective of people who grew up on a farm. And they have no problem, no qualms about putting down an adult dog, especially if you're doing it painlessly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another thing is people seem to think it's cruel to put a dog down. But a dog doesn't know what euthanasia is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah, well,
people seem to not understand that today.
Yeah, well, I seem to think, it's anthropomorphization. They think that Fido has a concept of his own mortality. It's like, oh, all the children I never mauled, They're not thinking that. They just live in the moment, literally. And a lot of it, too, is like, yeah, you're just keeping a dog like that around. Well, there's a couple of options. You can just warehouse it indefinitely. Or you could set him up to fail by turning it loose to injure somebody or something else, just to cause more problems. And that's not good either. I mean, it's going to wind up with a dog being put down. And yeah, the part of it is that, well, really the thing is that, human health and safety needs to be the top priority. And that's something else that's changed in the last 25 years. Now it isn't. Now the priority is, keeping the dog alive as long as possible. That's their metric. How many dogs have we saved?
Yeah, and there's that new Silicon Valley company, speaking of, and their focus is on dog life extension.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And didn't you say they're doing that? Well, supposedly they're experimenting on dogs, or they're selling it for use with dogs because the FDA won't approve life extension.
Well, that's my speculation, because I've been in the life extension movement for since the year 2000. Okay. So I've seen the evolution of this movement, and I've seen the problems, and I've talked to some of the scientists who talk about the problems. So basically, yeah, the FDA gets in the way if you're trying to create life extension solutions for people. The FDA doesn't like that. So you got to do it for dogs, and then it's a lot easier. It's kind of like the three-wheeled car. There's all these regulations for four-wheeled cars, but not for three-wheeled cars.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, the standards for, I guess, veterinary, drugs and treatments are lower, which I guess, makes sense. I mean, again, they're animals, but yeah, so they say, okay, we'll figure out how to get this to work for dogs. We'll make Fido live forever, and then we can apply it to, humans. It can kind of trickle up to humans. Why do you think I mean, now we're kind of going off topic here, but why is the FDA You probably don't know this, but I'm just thinking out loud. Like, why would the FDA oppose life extension treatments? What's their problem with it?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly. I know that in general, government authorities basically just like power, and they do whatever they can to keep whatever power they have and expand their power. You could
Sure.
say the same thing about the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Why does it seem that they're doing everything they can to prevent any nuclear power plants from being built? Where they force you to spend $1 billion in 10 years producing a mountain of paperwork
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with anything. It's supposedly for safety,
Yeah.
but you're just preventing any power plants from being built. So there's all these government organizations that do all these crazy things. I know you're a bit of a gun guy, right? So you know
Yeah.
the ATF has
Oh
all
yeah.
these strange rules that don't seem to have anything to do with safety. And the silencer thing is one of the weirdest things because silencers are legal in England, where guns are mostly outlawed there, but silencers are legal. But you
Yeah.
can't get a silencer in gun-friendly USA.
Yeah. Well, it's very
Not without.
difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult. Well, usually like any kind of shooting or self-defense is, on topic, but it was a few years ago. As I've spoken to people, I do some hog hunting. Actually, I haven't been out for a couple of years. I keep meaning to get out and do more, but then it's like, well, I got, this thing to do and that thing to do. And I guess it's not a major interest, but I do like, long range target shooting. And I, delete animals from time to time. And yeah, and I wanted to get, quote, a can. I guess the technical term is suppressor.
Suppressor.
Yeah, because not that I'm not nitpicking you, because it doesn't. Well, it depends on what you're shooting. It's interesting because if you're shooting, say, a subsonic 22, it really is silent. Because when I go to the range and guys are shooting, they got a can, literally, say if they've got like a Browning buckmark, like a 22 pistol with a can on it, all you hear is the action. You just hear like click 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 click. But if they're shooting, say, a 308, I actually have my one 308 rifle's got a threaded barrel, so you can thread on either just a suppressor or flash, they call it, I think, like a flash hider, which is a different device. But when they shoot that, you can still hear it for a couple of reasons. One is that you can't really muffle that. What you hear is a really loud, it's like a thud or a thump, followed, or just immediately hear it's a loud crack, like somebody snapping their fingers, because a bullet is supersonic. So it, breaking the sound barrier, so you get like a real tiny sonic boom out of it. But it's still quieter than, obviously, than an unsuppressed, rifle. Because I was hog hunting once, and I had, actually, I had a Remington 700, which I don't have anymore, in 308, and and I have to wear earplugs. So I saw a hog that needed shooting, so boom, shot him. But what happened was my right earplug was in all the way, but my left one wasn't seated properly, and it hurt. It was like somebody shoved an ice pick in my ear, and for a few weeks after, my hearing was wacky. Like I would hear, if I was listening to the TV, I would hear this like, so I mean, the purpose of something like that is to protect hearing. So you can shoot without ear protection or, damaging your hearing. But yeah, so anyway, I was looking into getting one, and I spoke to the manager of my range about it. Yeah, they are NFA items. And so there's all this, there's a ton of, legal and administrative hoops you have to jump through to get one. Although I think the first time is easier, because they say the best way to do it is you set up an NFA trust, like you set up an entity, and you sort of attribute the devices to that. So you have a lawyer set up an NFA trust, and the device actually gets put into the trust. May not be articulate, I'm oversimplifying, but that's kind of how it works. And I was like, oh, do I really want to jump through all those hoops? this was about 5 years ago. And there was actually a bill circulating in Congress to have suppressors removed as NFA items. So I'm thinking, well, yeah, I could jump through all the hoops, or I could just wait for them to just be so, like, as you made an interesting point, a lot of these countries that have way more gun control, you can just buy the suppressor off the shelf. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like buying targets or ear muffs or something. But yeah, I'm thinking I'd still like one. A can would be good, particularly if I had to delete a different kind of four-legged varmint, if you know what I'm talking about. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But
Zombie.
yeah, I don't want to wake the neighbors. I'm really neighborly like that. But yeah, that's interesting. Is yeah, they do. But it's unfortunate that we don't have a government agency that'll do things like that to dog people. Like why? Well, is it interesting? I guess our AC agencies are like that, but what they do is they enable the dog people to sort of lord over the rest of us. I don't know, or maybe they're just
Right. And then, yeah. Then we've got abuse of the ADA, which, where they just take their pet attack dog for a walk in any store.
Yep.
Including the ones where you'd think it would be a health violation.
Well, the thing is, they supersede all those health and safety codes. And when you think about how much power, but talk about power, I mean, that's what the Fed said. It's like, hey, you dog people, just do whatever you want. As long as you say the magic words, it's all good. So, great.
Yeah, and maybe it was so easy to get that legislation through because it was a Republican president who signed it. Seems like the Republican presidents get it's easier for them to sign stuff that people see as liberal legislation, and then it's easier for the liberal presidents to sign stuff that's seen as conservative legislation.
Sure.
They kind of fly under the radar, right? But
yeah.
Getting back to life extension, I've also been thinking about how much longer people would live if there were no dogs. And I would put the big three, but on your Discord, you've got a rule that you don't want people talking about the other animal species that people have as pets, and that's fair.
Well,
so
not
I'll just say,
really.
if you got rid of the big three, I think people would live, 10 years longer.
Yeah.
There's so much chaos and damage done by people's pets, to themselves, to their family members, to the community around them. If we just got rid of the big three, then the dogs in particular are doing
well. The dogs in particular, because other pets, like, I mean, sometimes we get like cat haters on here, and I'm like, okay, who gets meowed out of their house? Like, nobody. They could, I mean, and there's problems with cats too. It's like, and actually, I like cats. I have a cat. And actually, many like anti-dog people do. Perhaps at some level, it is a cat person versus dog person, debate. But the difference between cats and dogs is like, if you compare them to drugs, it's like the difference between, say, caffeine and methamphetamine. I mean, you could argue maybe you'd be better off with neither, but one of them is like way less bad than the other. Particularly if you're talking to, damage to the, society and the community. So a lot of times it's just a distraction to, focus on other animals, because I mean, if you talk about, like, say, attacks, it's like the number, like, it's almost unheard of for a cat to, say, just aggressively or aggress towards, like, bystanders. Like I talk about walking, I don't want to, like, delve into that too much. But yeah, I mean, it's almost, some people feel, okay, maybe it's not fair to pick on dogs so much, but it's fair to pick on them when they're 99% of the problem. So.
Yeah, so as a life extensionist, I do think that people would live a lot longer if we had no dogs. And that's another thing that I guess the average person doesn't think about, but it's something that we should be thinking about and talking about. how much longer we would live and how much healthier we would be. And partly because of all the resources going into the dogs. You can put that towards eating better food, taking some time that you would have spent on the dog and using that for yourself.
Yeah.
In
Well,
the form of exercise,
the thing too is
sleep.
with that is sure. I mean, you know, the dog owners are going to say, like, if I was to channel them, like, be the devil's advocate, like, if I were a dog person, I'd say, look, you know, I enjoy this hobby and I have a right, you know, I have a right to pursue what makes me happy. And if it, you know, knocks a couple of years off my life, so be it. But the problem isn't that really so much. The problem is they shorten the life expectancies of other people. And that's really where my issue comes in, is because and actually looks like Kidder just joined, and he knows what I'm talking about, is that, you know, it's kind of like they say when somebody gets a dog, everybody around them gets the dog. And really, that's the problem. Like, if all the problems with dogs or whatever, it goes back to like even other pets too. But, you know, if the problems are isolated to the pet owners themselves, it's really none of our business, right? I mean, maybe there's still some kind of indirect effects, like, say, for example, people like drinking to excess or smoking or whatever, like with increased healthcare costs and the like. But probably the thing to do there would be to tax it like they tax cigarettes. But you could make that point. I mean, one of the things that the dog nuts say is that dogs make you live longer. And I'm like thinking, like, that can't be. But what the point, though, is the point that I make, or why I get interested in the space is they don't just shorten their own life expectancies. They shorten the life expectancies of people around them. Not just, you know, in dog attacks. That's what I was interested in. You should check out this YouTube channel, this animal abuse in Hungary person. He gets into all the, you know, downsides of noise pollution in terms of like years of life lost, you know, health problems, loss of productivity, degraded academic performance, and all that. He's a very scientific minded person. But going back to that, it's like, you know, if the downsides of the pet ownership only affected the pet owner, I wouldn't care, you know. Sometimes we have those discussions on here. You know, if you have somebody who smokes or whatever, and I say, you know, I might tell that, I mean, I can set boundaries. I can say, okay, don't smoke in my house, don't smoke in my car. I can set those boundaries, but I can't really tell people what to do. But it's still a point worth making. Say, make the same point to smokers. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will say that what you're doing isn't doing you any good. You know, that's probably worth saying. But
Okay, I just found this animal abuse in Hungary. This is about inconsiderate, low IQ dog owners in Hungary who are treating their animals like bleep and keeping an entire country hostage. Yeah, pretty good. Okay.
Yeah, he's got a good one. I forget the name of it, about you know, the downsides of noise pollution. And you know, noise pollution, I mean, really from all sources, is a big problem. But that's the thing, is because that goes back to what I'm saying. It's like, I don't pick on other animals much because, well, either they're zoned out or they don't like project problems, right? Like, people don't get meowed out of their house, for example. But, you know, dog noise pollution is a really big problem in a lot of places, and it's an elephant in the room, and very few people want to address it. And with that said, it's like Kidder joined. What's up, Kidder?
I was going to say, am I the elephant in the room?
Yeah, you're just going to studiously ignore you.
Yeah, that's fine. Let the adults talk. Pipe it down, Kidder.
Yeah. So did you say you have another barker in your neighborhood now?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Woke up at 6:45, 7:45. I went downstairs at 8:45 so I could fucking sleep.
Oh, jeez.
Just going.
Is this?
I thought it was my 3D printer at first because it has that sound, but like, nope, keeps waking me up. It's not a 3D printer.
So, who are they? Are they like immediate neighbors, or do you know who it is?
No idea. I feel like it's the trash jail looking home down the road.
But it's not the same neighbor that you took to court, right? It's somebody else.
Nope.
Okay. It's somebody else.
No, yeah. Yep, and there's the other one behind us that was going constantly too, so that's cool.
God. Yeah, I mean, that's probably...
Went outside to piss last night, and there's like dogs gone wild. Like, good Lord, I just want to pee.
Why do you go outside to piss?
It's in the garage.
Oh, okay.
It's like, I don't know. Yep, exactly. I'm a wild animal. I'm a cat anyway, you know?
That's, yeah, we were talking about, well, how, pets can shorten life expectancy. But the thing with dogs is and dogs are the only animals from which we tolerate this, because everything else either doesn't do anything remotely like that, or it's already been kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Fido's in a class by himself.
I said on a group the other day I was going to become an air horn enthusiast.
God.
I think they would enjoy that.
But yeah, this stuff is, yeah, it's all this bad dog behavior, became normalized 20 years ago or so. We were discussing earlier, if we were to, take one of these, bark bags, right, and shoot them back in time, say 45, 50 years, what would the reaction be? Because I don't recall, it's just like with, dog attacks and stuff. I don't recall there being much of a barking issue back then either. I mean, it's like, you would hear dogs bark sometimes, but it wasn't like now where everywhere you go sounds like a dog kennel at feeding time.
I don't think it was even this bad 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Or I was deaf to it, but I can't imagine that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with it is you get, your tolerance for it goes down. I think there's actual medical science behind that. You don't learn how to tune it out. You actually become more sensitive to it. So as you've, endured all this barking torment, you get less tolerant of it. And that's probably part of it too. But yeah, it didn't used to be that. Well, probably because fewer people had them. They were probably better cared for. We had animal control people that actually did their jobs, 40 years ago. Most of the time.
I'll hear one bark and I'll scream, "Who the fuck was that?"
Yeah.
Well,
anytime you hear anything even sounds like a bark, you jump at the term. It's hypervigilance.
Yep.
It does. You become hypervigilant. You think, was that a dog? What is that? What's going on? Like, where is it? Like, is it going to bark more? What do I do? Because yeah, you get kind of a mild PT, or maybe more than mild PTSD from it after a while. So.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even bother calling this other jackass in because it was so sporadic they wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I probably should have called just because it was for so fucking long.
Jeez.
They just let Fido out every other hour and it just wakes everybody up. It's fine. What do you do? Huh?
God.
People got no goddamn respect.
None.
None.
Yep. I wonder if that's sort of at least part of this is due to sort of a drop in standards or lack of, I mean, it's lack of social grace or respect for the golden rule, like do unto others sort of thing. Lack of concern for others. Generally, because that's one good reason not to have a dog. And I've known people in my personal life, they'll say, yeah, I don't want to get a dog because it'll disturb others, right? Yeah, I don't want to do that to people. But it seems like
then you're talking to the right person.
You're talking to the right person, right? Because I don't want to create a nuisance either. I mean, we've discussed before, noise pollution is part of life. But the thing is, first of all, it should be kept to a minimum. And it should be, restricted to, ostensibly useful activities.
Exactly.
Right? Not
that's what I was gonna
because
say.
that's all these people do. 99.9999999% of dog barking serves no purpose. It's dog food being converted to noise. That's it. That's it. So I guess the answer would be to ban the sale of dog food.
Well, they already feed them filet mignon and carrots and apples, so
Yeah, we were talking about that too. Yeah, they feed the kids like ramen noodles, and Fido gets a Kobe beef burger or something.
Literally,
yeah.
You're not even cherry coating that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably the first time I've ever said cherry coated, but never mind.
Like Fido really appreciates it. I mean, you could probably just take a dump on a plate and give it to him, and he'd like it just as much.
Yeah, exactly. It's Kobe beef for dinner and the turd for breakfast.
Yeah. But but it goes back, they're anthropomorphizing. They think the dog will appreciate that. Right? Like if you make a really nice meal for a person, or for yourself even, typically you would expect they would appreciate that. Right? Because you spent the money and you put in the time and the effort and so forth. But Fido doesn't care. He's oblivious to that. He doesn't care.
Oh, wow. Thanks. That was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like those kids' cartoons. It's like The Lady and the Tramp, where he takes his date to a fine restaurant. It's two dogs. But this kind of goes back to the cult thing, because cults seem to inculcate this infantile mentality in their followers. So you've got the dog cult people acting like children with these childlike feelings toward dogs.
Yep.
Thinking that acting like dogs understand death, that dogs understand the difference between poo and filet mignon. No, they don't.
Yeah, they don't. Well, it goes back to, like I say, why dogs, or I mean really no animals, have rights, at least rights that we're bound to respect, because they don't really understand what those are, how to properly exercise them, the obligations that accompany them, and so forth. They're just oblivious to all that. Kidder, before you joined, we were discussing some dog bite related fatalities. Looks like somebody else in California got deleted by a quote protection dog. Do you really think Fido understands, like use of force or self-defense ethics?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah,
I've been trained for years.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean that's why they use dogs in police
They
work.
knew it was a bad person. Had to go.
Yeah, had to go.
Is that the one from called California Man Attacked and Killed by Pack of Dogs?
Yeah, that was, I think, early in the week. That actually has happened a couple of times in the past few weeks. There was another one 2-3 weeks ago. And that person was definitely, it was a contractor who'd been hired to work on the property, and the quote protection dogs, deleted them. And going back to double standards. Well, it could have been any animal, right? I mean, it could have been gerbils. Because they make great protection animals. But in any case,
those are scary.
yeah, the gerbils are terrifying.
Trained attack gerbil.
But the thing too is, if that had happened, like I said too, is what they've done is they've literally, well, at least from my perspective of that, is when you do something like that, like if you have a walled-in property with a bunch of murder mutts running around inside, what you've done is, for practical purposes, you've booby-trapped that space, right? And booby-trapping, at least, in such a way that can cause harm, like seriously injure somebody, is illegal as hell everywhere. But of course, I guess the thing is, though, from the dog worshippers' perspective, that's really not the case, because Fido is super sentient, in the way that only a supernatural being can be. But yeah, so I guess too is, I mean, the cults, they like you said, they inculcate, or they sort of infuse, I mean, a childlike mentality, or does it appeal to people who have that low maturity level, or both? I mean, do they, like, because I've seen too, is my observation of a lot of dog people is they have a very low maturity level. Like they're just basically, they're kids, essentially. Sometimes a very low maturity level, like 3, That's why I believe that's why they act the way they do, because I've actually gotten, professional advice on dealing with these people. Like, for example, my nutter ex-neighbor, and even other dog people I've dealt with, and Kidder's been through this, perhaps you have too, is that, if you say anything, even mildly critical about Fido, they just, like, completely lose their shit. Like, they throw a tantrum, basically.
Exactly what I was going to say.
They throw a tantrum, and it's like a little kid, like a real little kid, like a 3-year-old who, can't get their way, right? Like, you tell them, it's like, okay, you need to leash your dog, and they just completely lose their shit. They just purple in the face, jumping up and down, shaking their fists, like, because, again, you've essentially, you're getting in between them and what they want. That was one of the things I wanted to cover in this segment. Was I had an idea, is like, nutters always what? So I came up with a quick list, and you guys will appreciate this. Okay, nutters always lie, nutters always deflect, and nutters always escalate. And then escalate into, you throwing a tantrum, making threats or whatever. But that's how, like a real small kid or somebody with a very low maturity level would act. But
Yeah, so it seems the dog culture, I think, is programming the dog people to be more childlike, be less mature, like you said.
yeah.
And kind of giving them ideas of how to act when people criticize your dogginess, your doggy lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. They definitely do throw a fit, but yeah, it's a good observation. Yeah, very, very low maturity level there. And sometimes too, it's like when somebody hits, if you have a kid who's immature, they can outgrow it. But I don't know, is there a case of a 40-year-old actually growing up? I guess it may happen. I don't know. It'd be good to get somebody into the space, somebody who's like one of us who has, a strong background in, say, psychotherapy, who could, weigh in on that. But yeah, anthropomorphizing, and often, animals are depicted in, animated features. Like you were talking about Lady and the Tramp, or many of the other, Disney features, Looney Tunes. Although, a lot of times, like in Looney Tunes, they weren't always like portrayed in a good way, but like Wile E. Coyote. But I guess, lifetime of that, would cause people to think that, yeah, they're really just like us. They're sentient creatures. So.
I would say these people have no vision for their consequences of their actions. Like, why do you think they have numerous dogs and 14 kids? Like, oh, I'll just keep doing this.
Yeah, I'll just keep doing it. Then we were talking earlier, the other dog bite related fatality this week was, a man was deleted by 2 rescue pit bulls. I think at least one of them was a pit bull. There were 8 dogs in the home. And this is a small suburban house. This isn't like some big farmhouse surrounded by 200 acres. It's a crowded suburb. And of course, the whole yard is basically just a dog toilet.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And of course, the man would take the dogs to work, because he had a job. I don't know if he owned the place, but it was a small hamburger restaurant. I believe he would take the dogs, 2 of them, he'd bring 2 dogs to work with him and keep the dogs in the kitchen, which is a gross health code violation. And of course, and the wife seems more broken up over the loss of the dogs than him. And she still has 6 dogs, which is still too many for a neighborhood like that. I mean, somebody that should have been put, a stop should have been put to that all before, right? But this was just a problem was allowed to fester until there was a tragedy. And probably you haven't heard the last from them either, but maybe one of the remaining dogs will delete her or somebody else in the neighborhood.
I think you forgot a key point to that. I need to know how far away they rescued it from.
Yeah, I don't know where it was rescued from. We were talking about that earlier too. It's like, yeah,
Gotta be at least 1,000 miles.
Yeah, well,
otherwise you don't get the brownie points.
Yeah. Well, they have all this dangerous dog recycling going on. We were talking about that earlier. And how, like, I mean, adopting an adult dog from a shelter is probably, it's pretty sketchy at best, because why do adult dogs get dumped in shelters? 98% of them, it's because of behavior. They were behaving dangerously or destroying property, or just basically they turn the owner's life into a living hell, injuring people. That's why they wind up. That's why, after about 18 months, that's why so many pit bulls get dumped in shelters, because that's when they start to pit out. But yeah, I guess all these dummies think they can just love the proclivity for violence out of them. And we see how that turned out. So
raise them with love. It'll be fine.
Well, they always say it's all in how you raise them, but if you adopt an adult dog from a shelter, you don't know how it was raised. It's one thing if you get a dog from a close friend or family member, maybe, but from a shelter, you don't know how it was raised.
Yeah, but you just shower it with love and give it its Kobe beef and so forth, and it'll love you forever.
Oh, sure.
And by that, I mean rip your fucking throat out.
Yeah. I wanted to take a look at, let's segue a little bit. I wanted to take a look at, looking the wrong page.
Jesus
the other week,
Christ.
we were talking about, I've been trying to get some stats on dog bite related fatalities, like pre-1990, particularly pre-1980. And I wanted to segue into, discussion on, pit bulls, America's favorite dog to get rid of. So this was 1974 and 1975. So we had in 1974, we had 5 dog bite related fatalities. None of them were pit bulls, interestingly, which raises a question why. And I believe the reason is they were not part of the general dog population. Back then, virtually all pit bulls were essentially isolated to dog fighting operations. They were working dogs. Not many people had them. Well, I mean, they were. That's their job. So you had here is interesting. So actually, twice in 1 month, you had a Saint Bernard killed a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old boy the same month. You also had, you look at all these ages, 5-year-old boy killed by a shepherd, 7-month-old boy killed by a dachshund. It's probably not like one of those little wiener dogs. It's probably like a full-size, dachshund, I'm thinking. Might have been a wiener dog. So then we had, let's see, a 5-year-old boy killed by a pack of unknown breed. And I also had this, interestingly, well, actually, yeah, so you had these 5. But right in 1975, we had a 5-year-old girl killed by, and I'd never heard of these, a Basenji. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. It's a breed of dog from Africa. And what's really interesting about them is they don't bark. It's the only dog breed that doesn't bark, apparently. I was going to say, why haven't we heard from them before? Well, because there's nothing to hear, I guess. Then you have these other killings. But, what's interesting is going back to, how dogs are sold to the public. Now they're trying to push, pit bulls as being, America's favorite family dog going back to the founding, I guess. It was part of the, the 1619 project. Is the pit bulls for everybody? I think it was written into the Declaration of Independence also that everybody was going to own pit bulls. But I wanted to take a look at this. This is, we've been talking about this book, this Death by Pitbull. Serena said she was going to read this and review it for us. Should be interesting. I mean, I think that putting too much focus or all the focus on pit bulls is a mistake. I'm not sure. It doesn't pay dividends, let's put it that way. Not that they don't deserve to be hated on, they do. It's just that constantly railing against them, it's counterproductive in a lot of ways. But I also wanted to talk about this. This was, I like this. Pitbull, the battle over an American icon. This is a pro-pit book by this Bronwyn Dickey. And it's a pro-Pitbull book, right? So you can see how it's being pushed here. When she brought her new dog home, she saw no traces of the infamous viciousness in her affectionate, timid pit bull, which made her wonder, how do you identify a pit bull? No, we get to that later. That's the fun part. How had the breed, beloved by Teddy Roosevelt, Helen Keller, and TV's Little Rascals? Now, it's interesting. I believe, well, first of all, Little Rascals, actually, it wasn't a TV show. There were a series of movie shorts produced and distributed really before TV became a thing in the 30s. But that's a nitpick. I'll let him off the hook on that one. But apparently, Petey on the Little Rascals, supposedly the kids, the child actors, hated the dogs. He was a nasty-ass dog. And at some point, the dog was poisoned. They suspect, maybe don't know for sure. So again, this is pure propaganda because this was, and also you realize too, as a TV show, even if it's a reality show, goes back to what we were talking about before with the way animals, particularly dogs, are presented in media and entertainment. Is if you watch something like this, you're only seeing what the producer wants you to see, right? So if you're watching, a TV show or a movie with a dog in it, you have to consider, one, that's a very highly trained dog actor with handlers on the set. Two, everything is very carefully scripted and choreographed. And it's also heavily edited, right? So if the dog, bites another actor, right, unless that's on script or the producer or the director decides to leave it in, that's going on the cutting room floor. So again, see, they're pointing to entertainment as a source of information. It's like, I want to learn more about the space program. I'm going to go watch the Star Trek trilogy or Star Wars trilogy again. Yeah, that'll tell me all about it. Also, I believe that Teddy Roosevelt's dog had to be kicked out of the White House. I think it bit an ambassador. I'm not sure about that. So this is, pure propaganda. So how did the breed, beloved by all these people, come to be known as a brutal fighter? Well, probably because it was used as a fighting dog. Her search for answers takes her from 19th century New York City dogfighting pits, the cruelty of which drew the attention of the recently formed ASPCA, to, again, but then they're saying in the 20th century movie sets where pit bulls cavorted with Fatty Arbuckle and Buster Keaton and blah, blah, blah. So there is a review written of this book that really, just badmouths the hell out of the anti-Pitbull people. Let's take a look at that. So this was, where was this? Yeah, this was, oh, look at this. So this was in Literary Hub. So Literary Hub, I hate the sharing. It says literary. So right away, what do you see? What do we have here? We have a baby with the fur angel looking over him. The nanny dog is just, basically infatuated with this baby that it would defend with its very life. Or maybe it's just a snack to eat later. Who knows?
Yeah, it looks like some nice resource guarding.
Yeah, resource guarding. Yeah. So,
what do you think he's going to eat first, the head or the toes or hands, or what do you think?
They usually go for the head, probably the head first. So
I could take that thing down in one bite.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's a snack size human.
Mm-hmm.
So
snack pack.
Snack pack, yeah. So how writing about pit bulls led to death threats online and in real life. So, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I get rid of this stupid thing in the lower left here? I don't know. But, so they said when Bronwyn Dickey affixed the subtitle to Pitbull, and there's a link here, her recently published study of the pendulum swinging fortunes of the dog who has gone from hero to reviled outsider in the span of a century. Like hero. Like, I don't remember pit bulls being heroes or being presented that way until maybe very recently. I think this is pure propaganda. So anyway, she could not have known how bizarrely close it would track to her own fate. So they say the battle, this is the subtitle of the book, The Battle Over an American Icon. Now, one of the things I don't see pit bulls as ever being an American icon. Like if somebody, again, go back 50 years, said, are pit bulls an American icon? People would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Nobody believed that. Or nobody thought any dog was. I mean, if an animal is an American icon, it's a bald eagle, right? That's, one of our, national symbols. I mean, it's on currency and coins and the like, right? how many coins have Pitbulls on them? Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now the people are going to be, agitating for the mint to put out dollar coins with, Mick the Mauler on them or something. So anyway, so she's claiming that pit bulls were an American icon. So anyway, in a few short weeks, the battle over an American author, the true subject of her book, the steep cost of cursory judgment, stereotyping, and the durability of the fictions we frequently prefer over scientific evidence. It's a science, people. The science is echoed in events of her own life. They are not pretty. So even before the book's launch at New York's Strand bookstore, I've actually been there. It's a pretty cool place. Last month, the hate groups that gather in the internet's gaseous depths. Is that where we are? Are we in the gaseous depths, or is that how you would characterize where we are? Emerge from the digital dark to fire salvos of gory memes and full cap epithets at the author. She was taken as a dangerously vocal agent, speaking as she would from Knopp's rostrum, of what they have termed the Pitbull propaganda machine.
Can I interject here?
Sure, knock yourself out.
There's a hard to see white X above the right corner of that thing that you don't want in the left and lower left-hand corner.
Lower left.
So you just click on that X and it'll make that black video thing.
Oh, I see it. Yep.
Right above where, there you go.
Got it. Yep. Okay, you're right. Yeah, it's hidden. Okay, initially, so the term the Pitbull, in fact, anyone perceived to advocate anything less than full and immediate eradication of the breed they believe to be natural-born killers, possessed of an invincible drive to maul to death anything that moves. Now, a lot of it, too, is this kind of goes back to essentially allowing the adversary to set the terms, right? Because to them, anybody who doesn't really love all dogs, especially pit bulls, is a hater. Even if you go back to, when I first got into the space, I didn't consider myself a dog hater at all. I just said, look, we need to, regulate these things like we do everything else on four legs. Like, it's really not that complicated. But, they set the terms, say, oh no, uncontrol, you're the spawn of Satan because you don't, you're not endlessly obsessed with, worshiping every dog in creation. Come to think, so apparently what the point they're trying to make here is this author was being targeted for, bullying, harassment, threats and the like by all these evil, anti-pit bull and anti-dog people. Which, again, I find really hard to believe because at Alien, it goes back to what we talked about. It's like, many of the people, and particularly many of the people in the BSL space, are pretty milquetoast. Like, they don't support going door to door and rounding up these dogs. I mean, I do, but they don't, right? They want it to be just like every other dog law is basically, we'll pass it and then just studiously ignore it. So anyway, initially the tempest was contained in a relatively small teapot. A Facebook group with a few hundred followers called Pit Bulls and Amputees, hardy har har. They announced the forthcoming publication of her book with one of the milder images of their inventive canon of dog attack and dog attacking memes. The book's cover superimposed on a photo of a pit bull emitting a torrent of vomit. They advanced the name calling such as pit nutter and ignorant bitch. Then to the ad hominem. She has a screw or two loose, just like her dad, who is supposedly this National Book Award-winning author and the author of Deliverance. Next, in order to set the record straight about Dickie and the dangerous subject of her nonetheless meticulously researched books, with a bibliography that runs 35 pages. But I'm sure, see, all the sources, they only source each other, right? I'm sure, I mean, I haven't read this, but I'm sure that bibliography points to, studies put out by, Best Friends, Animal Society, and, Humane Society of the U.S., and Bad Rap, and all these other, dog nut and pit apologist, outfits. They proposed a protest outside the store. So this gets interestinger and interestinger. So let's see. On the appointed evening, all was bookishly pacific. The occasional browser picking through the cheap stalls, couples conversing, nary a snarling cur in sight. Those were coming courtesy of the animal care centers of New York's mobile adoption van parked outside. The outside adorable black and white pit mix pictured smiling on the back of the van was a trick. So obviously was a handsome Santiago, a four-legged model with a winning patch of black over one eye, was now beating his tail against the rug of the rare book room. At the approach of every admirer, it was inevitable he would turn murderous, according to sites such as dogsbite.org. Now, again, it's a misrepresentation. I don't think that the host there has said that, every pit bull does not spend every waking moment attacking people. I mean, yeah, 99.9% of the time they're not. But you could say the same thing for serial killers. I mean, not that, I don't like comparing dogs to people, but, Ted Bundy was not killing people every minute of every day. 98% of the time, 99% of the time, he was just a middle-class guy living his life. That doesn't get him off the hook. Because what they're doing here, it's I don't know if I covered this in my Nutter, ideological fails series or not, but it's weak induction. So they're saying, okay, the dog, that pit bull, and we'll get into breed ID in a minute, that pit bull is behaving. So what I can do is I can induce that means that all pit bulls are always behaving, right? Based on this one example. Anyway, he settled for licking faces, suffering his paw to be pressed repeatedly against an ink pad, and then the title page of a newly purchased book. So they're having the dog basically sign the book. And this dog may have been on drugs too, because they do that. They'll say, oh, look at how well behaved this pit bull is. When he's like drugged, to the gills on anti-anxiety meds or even narcotics. So the closest the author got to unwarranted personal commentary was a man who stood up during the Q&A and more blurted, oh, you're so good looking, blah, blah, blah. It was uncomfortable. The audience would do more. This article kind of goes on and on. They make her feel like the Salman Rushdie of animal issues, as she would put it. This night, there was no protest. It had been called off under pressure from Random House's legal department. But I thought it was supposed to be people protesting the book. So Random House, this doesn't add up. Are you guys reading this the same way I am? There was no protest. It had been, what was called off? Did they call off the rest of the book event due to the protest? The thing is, again, it's very rare for an anti-dog person to actually go, protest something in real life. It very rarely happens, mainly because they get intimidated into silence by the dog people. So let's keep looking at this. I know it's kind of dragging on, but this is really interesting stuff. So, as one of the most imperative messages of Pitbull is that in an educated society, every claim must be submitted to scrutiny. This one may too. The result, built with the precision of an engineer, is a case for seeing the campaign to vilify one type of dog. Oh, here it comes. We knew we got this far before this came, as a surrogate for expressing class and racial animus. So in other words, when you say you don't like pit bulls or that they don't make suitable family pets, really that's just a thinly veiled expression of your hatred of poor people and either non-whites or whatever race of people you don't like. Okay, that's their claim. Like you can't.
That really took a while to get to.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's why this thing seems like I'm kind of droning on here. The whole thing is important, but it takes a while to get to the point. So they hook you in with this article that almost seems like it's semi-rational, and then they drop this in your lap. So the thing is, the point is that see now they're injecting class and race politics into this. So, but interestingly, going back to like bashing other animals, like saying the other week, it's like, you can't, it's virtually impossible to have a pet tiger. Like, why isn't that racist or classist? What's the problem there? So anyway, early in the day, Dickie had a lunch at a Midtown hotel where she and her husband were saying, the biggest occasion of my life, blah, blah, blah. The book that cost nearly 8 years. It took you 8 years to write a propaganda book about pit bulls. He's not a very prolific writer. And everything I had. The result, built with a precision of an engineer, is a case for seeing the campaign. Okay, they're just repeating what's up here. Okay. I was told, don't go into the race thing. It's a quagmire. And that's why I often tell people, it's like, sometimes you might want to, like when I was talking about, the draft letter to our politicians, I know a lot of people are tempted to put some, anti-Pitbull, rhetoric in there. And again, I don't disagree with what those people say. It's like, yeah, Pitbull should not be a service dog. Unless the service is to eat the faces off of little kids, then it makes a good service dog. But for any other service, it's not worth having, right? But the thing is, maybe it's often better if you're talking about dogs to sidestep the breed specific arguments, because they, if you see what's in red up here, this paragraph. This paragraph, see what they're doing is they're going right for the class and race rhetoric. And this really resonates with a lot of people. So let's keep going, because this gets good. This is worth hanging on for. Okay. So I was told, don't go into the race thing. It's a quagmire. But I had to tell the whole story. The whole story meant to the young journalist, following the map back to primary sources and investigating every pit bull claim, myth, and canard. She has a deep reverence for substantiated data. Now, this gets better because they're going to get into the whole science of this. Watch it, folks. She's going to science the crap out of this. So with the irrevocability of publication day approaching for the past few weeks, she'd been asking at 3 a.m., petrified I would get some detail wrong. Well, she's already got most of it wrong, but let's keep going. So for 2 hours over salads and wine, the latter a medicinal necessity on a nerve-wracking day for a writer who admits that worry sometimes gets the better of her, understanding in a light of a threat that Pitbull foes were planning to annihilate this country club, white bread girl's book on pit bulls with a tsunami of own reviews, right? So, the anti-pit nutters, I guess, are, teaming up to, brigade the, the Amazon review section. Remember Kidder, it wasn't last time, the time before, I think it was just you and I, and we looked at the reviews for that kid's book. What was it? The Retriever with a Block Head, where the dog had to wear a mask to hide the fact that it was a pit bull. And like almost all the reviews, it was all either 1-star reviews or 1-star reviews. And that shows like what a contentious social issue this is, because all the pit bull people and the dog fanatics, they think that this is the greatest story ever told. This dog on a journey to find herself, which again is like turbo anthropomorphization. And then you had, the anti-dog people who came out, bringing the anti-pit people, came out to flame the crap out of it. So anyway, the supposedly the anti-pit bull nutters are going to brigade the Amazon review section. So Dickey talked about the nature of truth, the fear that drives hatred, and the curative power of science. Science, peasants, science. This gets better. We're gonna science the crap out of this thing. All are primary themes in her book, which is less about dogs than is about people perceiving dogs. Remember, it's all in your head. They're a proxy for what frightens us, whether the expression of a vulnerability like love or socially prescribed bigotry. Because, we've all been raised from birth to hate dogs, particularly pit bulls, right? And justice is a burning issue to Dickey. So here it's like, this is somebody who's taken on this, supposed anti-pit bull crusade to expose it for just the, cesspool of, racism and fascism and unrestrained capitalism that it is, right? So, in an irony familiar to many crusaders for fairness, she is therefore in for large helpings of iniquity. Okay, so maybe I'll just kind of like skim through this. So where does it actually get good, So you go, I'll just read. Pitbull charts a course of this cultural icon. The Pitbulls are not cultural icons, except maybe until very recently. From the beginning of the 19th century, like what a ridiculous claim to make. When the descendants of the bull-baiting dog began to be associated with the lowest type of character who took up the breeding of lions for the proper purpose of fighting each other, it seems like there's some kind of bait and switch going on here. You've got this, everybody recognizes that pit bulls are the symbol of America. They are, or were, 200 years ago, they were the symbol of America. Pit bulls represent America. But then they go on to say, well, it's just this bull-baiting dog, basically being used by folks at the bottom of society. Like, doesn't that seem like she's trying to have it both ways here? Does it seem like that to you?
Have your cake and eat it too.
I guess. So anyway, the divide soon grew to a chasm between those who could not be talked, reasoned, or wheedled out of their contempt. Such enmity has evolved into a tenacious hostility that today results in the summary execution. We're talking about, why aren't these dogs put down? Because they're people, right? These aren't like, unwanted animals being euthanized or being executed. Summary execution. We don't do that in a democracy, do we? Of animal shelters of more than 1 million pit bulls every year. I think now it's up to like 1.5 million. But like I said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The irony here, of course, is it's the advocacy of people like her that's creating that problem of the summary execution of 1 million pit bulls every year.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why there's so many of them.
Yeah, because if they weren't constantly advocating for them, fewer people, there'd be fewer of them. There'd be less, I guess, demand for them, I guess, because people, they push this propaganda, and then people realize once they have one of these dogs that, and I think it probably apply to any dog. I mean, dogs are, have been presented to the public as these totally carefree best friends, right? But even a little rat dog, it can be a huge pain in the ass, as most people know. But pit bulls more so, because they bring the dog home, it deletes the other pets, it bites people, it destroys the house, and you can't live like that. You can't, so they got to get rid of it. But that's because, they've been, drawn in, they've been duped by people, by her and people like her who buy into this shit. So anyway, but this is where it gets really good. I love this. Talk about bait and switch coming. Yet Dickey takes great care in outlining Pitbull is neither a single breed nor even definitively identifiable. Yay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. You can't identify a pit bull. Wait a minute.
Even though it's a national icon.
Yeah, exactly. This is so bad, it's good. I mean, I'm finding this very entertaining. It's like, we've got this thing that can't be identified as our national icon, right? But they can't be identified.
Hero masked in the dark.
Yeah, it's like it can't be identified.
I wasn't hunting bald eagles because bald eagles can't be identified.
Yeah, I thought it was a turkey. Yeah. I thought it was a duck. I was duck hunting.
You gotta put Chef
prove it
Meat's quote in here.
Yeah.
Pit bulls are identified by the ordinary dog owner or something.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, they found that, but even goes on. I think there's a quote statistic in here. So it's pit bull. It's not neither a single breed nor even definitively identifiable. A study cited in the book, a study done by WHO, found even trained animal professionals are unable to correctly identify the breed makeup. So really nobody, literally even a dog expert, can't identify a pit bull, which is supposedly our national icon. So correctly identify the breed makeup of sheltered dogs over 87% of the time. Well, that's even worse than police sniffer dogs. We have no clue what breed any of these dogs are. None. Literally, you can't tell a dachshund from, a Presa Canario. They're just totally unidentifiable. Even though the American Kennel Club, I think, recognizes over 200 dog breeds. But you can't tell one from the other. How do you categorize something that can't be identified? So right here, it goes on with, it goes right from saying it's a national icon to something that can't be identified by anybody. It's just unreal. But there it is. It's a bait and switch. They talk about how, not necessarily praising, they're talking about pit bulls are the American icon. You can point to that like, that dog is our symbol. Of course, I have no clue what kind of dog it is, but it's our symbol, right? Oh, my dog. Holy mother of dog. So, after voluminous research, Dickey came to the conclusion that the venom of the haters, who themselves possess an uncontrollable obsession with the violence they ascribe to their canine target, is not aimed at these dogs. But again, okay, here we go again. They don't really dislike the dogs, but rather at the cipher of their stereotyped owner. So really, again, if you don't like pit bulls, that's just a thinly veiled expression of your hatred for poor people or whatever race of people you don't like. Okay.
Uh-oh.
It has nothing to do really with the dogs themselves. Often,
Uh-oh.
here it comes.
Genocidal racist alert or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Often he, meaning the stereotyped owner, is non-white, poor,
Mhm.
stripped of prospects, feared and reviled. Society will have his dog in lieu of him. So we're coming for your dog, you poor non-white people. We're taking your dogs away. We're taking your dogs away. It's interesting, though, they bring that up because, if you recall, my neighbor who, got into trouble with the, her 3 unleashed pit bulls that were deleting cats and attacking people on bicycles and so forth. And, I said I looked up the property and the tax assessor's website. The value of the improvements is assessed, like the home and the other buildings, whatever's on it, is assessed at 0. And I'm thinking, how stereotypical is that? I don't believe it's a non-white person living there, but because it's a white neighborhood. But I'm sure that everybody took offense at this, not because of what the dogs were doing. I mean, people really don't mind having your cat killed is not an issue. Being attacked while bike riding is not an issue. Having the whole neighborhood on lockdown, that's literally what happens every year, 12 to 18 months on average. My neighborhood, which is really otherwise crime-free, goes on lockdown because of something like this. But what's being expressed here is really that's not the problem. Like all these people, I got my other neighbors, like a whole posse of people, went to court to testify against the dog owner. I would have gone myself, but I was not witnessed any of this. I really had nothing to add. But what's being expressed here is that really the only reason anybody took issue here was because they're all racist and classist, right? They don't care about the murder mutts running loose. What they care about is smearing poor non-white people. That's what's being expressed. So what else do we got here? This but this is the kind of crap you run into. So, and this is why it's so difficult to get traction on these issues, because, and that's another kind of oscillation is that, well, here they're blaming, I guess, both. Well, here they're not blaming, it's not racist against the dog itself, because they'll tell you if you don't like pit bulls or some other dog breed, that's racist. But then, of course, the reply is like, well, a dog's not a person. Breed of dog and race of human are not equivalent. And they say, okay, then they sidestep that and they say, well, really, it's racism or classism aimed at the perceived demographic that owns them. And I, concede I guess there is a stereotype there. Like if you see many of these dog attacks, particularly, involving pit bulls, like my neighbor, to the north here, are people of very limited means. Probably in no small part because they have the dog. But that gets into that's where that becomes very contentious politically, because then they say, some folks will say, well, you're hating on poor people if you attack it. It's alien. That's what you and I were discussing in the beginning, is that pet ownership, particularly dog ownership, sort of impoverishes people in a lot of ways. And this is one of those examples. And of course, that person is being fined. Well, here are the stipulations. They pay a $500 fine, fence in the property to certain standards. They had to get a $150,000 bond on each dog. And all of that had to be completed within 2 weeks, which I believe that time runs out this coming week, because it was about a little less than 2 weeks ago that went down. So it's like, yeah, they're being fined $500. But some people would say, like, here's the problem. When you point out, it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't own a dog because it's too expensive, this being one of the reasons. Well, the reply is that, well, we don't want to make dog ownership an elite thing, so we shouldn't fine them or make them put up fences or buy insurance or anything. Because that's, when you ask for that, that's an expression of your, hatred for poor people. You want to, punish them and say, oh, you can't have the pet you want. You peasant.
God forbid they support their animal habit.
Anyone for anything. But that's always going to come up over and over again in every issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the point to make, the retort to that is to say, look, pet ownership is a privilege and a luxury. Okay, it's not a right. It's not something somebody needs to do. And yeah, some people aren't going to be able to afford it. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. Particularly if it's something bad. I mean, the other thing to consider too, if you compare this, like, say, to other, bad habits or addictions like smoking, the government taxes the shit out of cigarettes. I quit smoking 30 years ago, but I smoked my way through college. But if I go to the convenience store, I'll see like a pack of Marlboros is like $8.50 or something. But I know, and most of that is tax. It's not production costs or distribution or even profit for the tobacco companies. Most of that is tax. Yet, I think most smokers, your lower income brackets tend to smoke more. That's my understanding. So isn't that a tax on the poor?
Definitely.
It's a tax on the poor. So we can tax that, but not this. Like, we can't charge them, we can't tax them or fine them or charge them fees, because God forbid everybody doesn't get to own not whatever pet they want, but as many of them as they want.
The theme here is that the author is going to be coming up with the usual suspect defenses over and over again.
Yeah.
Just the usual neo-Marxist litany. So you've got the class warfare, the race warfare,
Yep.
She's such a walking stereotype.
Yeah.
And her dad wrote Deliverance. Is that what that said?
That's what it said. Yeah, her dad wrote Deliverance. So, and there's a hell of a story for you. But yeah, you're right. It's like they inject, but yeah, like you've said, and this is a political issue, right? This isn't about, like, again, if you talk about, like we were talking earlier about, other like species of pets, you don't have anything even remotely like this relating to cats or guinea pigs or parrots or any of that stuff. It's only when you get into the dog space do you see stuff like this. It's because, dogs in society are a political issue. And yeah, and they hide. Yeah, you're right. She's a neo-Marxist. She's a social justice warrior. And I don't want to like badmouth. I know we got some folks in the space who come from different points in the political spectrum, but you could say that, like, okay, that viewpoint is ostensibly, exists to protect the rights of people, right? Poor people, or, disadvantaged minorities and the like. But it's being hijacked to protect these dogs. And you see, it sort of oscillates here. It sort of oscillates back and forth from the dogs themselves to the people who own them.
So this book is like Deliverance Pitbull edition.
When did you first start seeing this? Because I remember seeing it the first time I saw this equivalence of BSL with race-specific legislation in an article in one of those community weekly papers. Somebody had written an article about how pit bulls, and this was before pit bulls were really widespread, but he was saying any criticism of pit bulls is basically equivalent to racism.
Yeah. Was he was he
Yeah,
alluding to?
that was about 20 years ago. So when was the first time you saw anything like that?
That's interesting. I mean, I got into this space, early last decade, but I picked up on it pretty quickly because, I know like a dozen years ago, it was pretty typical to, because frequently I would follow the Miami Pitbull ban, and that was, one of the criticisms of that was that people would say, well, it's racist, or it's, racist, fascist, unconstitutional. Those issues are raised quite a bit. So it's probably, I would think, and but it goes back before that. Again, it was about the time that the crazy train got a full head of steam, probably like early 2000s, when the whole thing dog culture just went completely insane, I would say. Be interesting to trace the origins of that. You might be able to find some, obscure references to it from earlier. But it didn't become, widespread probably until 20 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago.
And that's when the dog rescue thing started picking up too.
Yep. This really when all these, I think it really got bad. Well, it was 2007 was the Michael Vick dogfighting bust. And that was, I think they're pretty crazy even going up to that point, but that sort of threw a bucket of gasoline on the fire. And that's when it got really nuts with the, pit bull advocacy and dog rescuing, and the like. Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting, to sort of follow the, evolution of this, of the cult. But yeah, and it's not, that's the other thing too, is let's see, when was this book published? This book was published in, I think it was first released in, well, it was released on Audible in 2016. When was this article written? The one we were just reading. This is a long article. Oh, here's all this, I'll link the link to this review here, and yeah, a lot of like pro and anti pitbull stuff in the comments section. It's the usual, nothing new here. This article was written, 2016. So even in 2016, it was a pretty common narrative. So yeah, this is somebody trying to capitalize on this, on this narrative. Pit bulls are people. So. June 24, 2016. Yeah. Someday this war is going to end. I don't, and two is, what happens too is that they allude to all these, death threats, and intimidation made by the anti-pitbull people, but I don't see them doing that. Like as we pointed out before, most people, in that space are like you would say, pretty milquetoast. They like to, because most of them are just virtue signaling imbeciles anyway, right? That's another reason why nothing gets done in this space, because most anti-Pitbull people, 80% of them, really just, they're dog lovers. They're these adept types who like to virtue signal about how bad pit bulls are. And part of it too is I think part of what they're doing is they're kind of trying to deflect away from their nasty ass dog breed, like their Doberman or their Rottweiler or whatever. It's like, yeah, my dog sent 4 kids to the hospital, but they all deserved it. If it had been a pit bull, they would have been killed.
Right.
So this is all fake. It's fake. It's all fake. So that's basically covers everything I wanted to discuss today. We've been on for, oh shit, is it 3:30? Is it another 2-hour segment? God damn. It's gonna take me an hour just to upload this thing. Good segment though. A lot of good topics covered. I don't know, maybe I'll stay on for another 10 minutes. Or we could, table this for, if you have anything you'd really like to discuss in depth, we could table it for next time. Like I was saying in the beginning, I guess Kidder, you weren't on, but you'll hear. But I wanted to see if I could move these voice chats to Skype or perhaps Teams. I think it might be a little more productive. I think the application works better. Plus, we could get people on who aren't on the Discord, which could make things pretty spicy. I mean, all of us, I think we have a pretty good rapport. That's my perception. Even if we don't agree 100% of the time, but I don't expect to. But, we get a dog person on here, things could get pretty spicy.
Probably pretty stupid.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe you could do a debate with it, or, first do some discussions with some pro dog people, and then maybe do a debate.
Yeah.
On one of their debate channels. There's a debate channel called Crucible, which has been hosting a lot of pro-con debaters.
Yeah. Well, not even. The thing is, I'm not, even like we discussed earlier, I'm not even really anti-dog per se. What I am is I'm anti-dog, pro-dog policy. I find it deeply offensive that dogs and dog owners are granted a ridiculous amount of power in our society. This is a narrative I beat to death, but it's worth going over again. It's all these doggy double standards, like with the noise pollution. Nothing else is allowed to get away. No other pet. And you could say that maybe having no pets is a good idea. I'm not even going to debate you on that. I'm like, okay. But the thing is usually things like if somebody has a house cat or a tank full of fish or, a parakeet, that's not going to create a public nuisance, right? None of those is going to maul the UPS guy to death or noise pollute somebody out of their house. That's not going to happen. But not only in the dog space, not only does it happen, but it's actively enabled. And that's what's wrong. And I think, and that's the thing, it's a tough narrative to debate. Who is going to say that all this dog noise pollution is somehow necessary? That we don't have a right to peaceful use of our space? Is that the point they're going to make? And the answer is probably, because, they excuse this stuff with canine supremacy.
Maybe next time we could talk about the influence of the big dog food companies. So You've got it's kind of ironic. You've got the big two chocolate companies, Nestle and Mars, are also the big two dog food companies now because I guess they bought dog food companies. And so, and it's ironic because chocolate is poisonous to dogs, but
Well, what do they do? They need to put chocolate into dog food. Actually, probably most of them don't know that. It's like, yeah, chocolate flavored kibble. Yeah, I'm picking that up for Fido and Rover. Dummies.
but they seem to be paying for all of these programs where dogs are brought into schools so that kids think that dogs are great, and then they ask their parents to buy dogs, and then more dog food is sold.
Yep, yeah. Perpetuate the cycle. Yeah, they got to loop them in young. Well, that's what the cigarette companies used to do. They used to
Cigarette girl, right?
yeah. Present, or tobacco companies, present smoking as being something that glamorous adults do. So, teenagers would want to imitate that. So, you get them
Well, they used to have they have cigarette girls in bars and stuff who'd go around and give people free samples.
Oh, that too. Yep.
Yeah, you could actually get free cigarettes. So that's kind of like bringing the dogs into the schools.
Yeah.
I guess.
Got to get them hooked young. Well, I'm waiting for the lawsuit when some kid has like a fatal allergy attack. Because like peanut products have pretty much been banned in schools because I think maybe 1% or less of the population has a serious peanut allergy. So many schools have banned, peanut products in on the grounds for that reason. But when you talk about something like 5% of the population has a serious pet allergy, which may or may not include dogs, something to the point where it's actually can be fatal, I'm waiting for that to happen. There's a double standard there too. And even it goes into, you're talking about, the economic interests. I think that most of this is driven by ideology. Because where's like Big Peanuts trying to push peanuts into schools? But then yet you have these, these dogs being, foisted on everybody. At least I guess for now, I guess they think they can get away with it. But I mean, there's definitely some of that there. Yeah, they want to, like the tobacco companies, get them hooked young. And then you've got a customer for life. So they got to have that dog. If the dog dies, you got to get another one. Right?
Yep. People
right.
need something to live for. They want to live for dogs.
Yeah. You got to dedicate your life to dog. The other thing, too, you bring up, like, the rescue culture. And I've covered this, I think, a couple of times in, in monologues were, these shelter rescue scams. I think we should do a deep dive into that. But it's interesting, you see, in all the, sort of misleading language they use, like, oh, he's reactive or doesn't like cats or whatever, right? But also it seems what they're asking for is to say, okay, Rex needs a home with no men, no kids, no other pets, single family home with a fence, etc., etc., etc. So, and then there's all these other stipulations. Doesn't like loud noises. Doesn't like bright lights. Doesn't, you can't do this. So really what they need is, and I made this observation when I was looking at one of these, is what they want is they're asking for a single woman to basically become a nun for the dog cult. That's how I interpret that. I'm not going to express. They're not going to express it that way, but that's what it is. We need a young, or not young necessarily, but we need a single woman to dedicate her life to dog. No spouse, no kids, no other pets. Can't have people over. Basically can't take the dog off property, has to own a property to certain specifications. And you think the supply of dogs like that vastly outstrips the demand because there's very few people who are can do that, much less would do it, because even if you have somebody who's positioned that way, how many of the, whatever it is, 1% of the population, how many of them are willing to take on an enormous liability like that?
Yeah, it's some kind of a bizarre pyramid scheme that's going to run out very quickly.
Yeah.
It's like, but they're going to solve the million pit bulls being euthanized every year by convincing people to adopt dogs.
Yeah.
How is the math going to work here?
No, it doesn't. Well, that's why they get euthanized, because there's not a demand side solution for the problem. Because even if it was, I mean, I brought this up before too. Let's say every pit bull or nasty ass dog in a shelter were adopted today. The inventory is completely cleaned out. They're just going to fill right back up again. Well, first of all, many of those people are going to return those dogs. But even if none of them do, there's still, you got all these moans breeding these things like rabbits. You know, they breed them like rabbits, thinking they can sell them, but of course they can't sell them. So they wind up, dumping the unwanted puppies in the shelter. So yeah, they're just going to fill right back up again. It's a supply side issue. But nobody really wants to address that either. So yeah, so the solution is you just, pink juice. Lots of pink juice.
And then blame the critics.
Yeah, and blame the critics. Well, yeah, because it's, I was even on, it was on the band Pitbull's Reddit a while back. And it's probably somebody trolling. It's like, well, you complain about pit bulls and shelters. I forget how the question was worded, but something the express of was like, well, why don't, maybe if more people adopted these things and took care of them properly, the problem would go away. And right away, I piped in, because again, what they're expressing is their sense of entitlement. It's on you peasants. You got to adopt these things and train them up and control them properly. And I said, no. Nobody, no one has any obligation to adopt any pet, much less one that can take down a grown man. Now, does that sufficiently answer your question? I don't have to do shit. Nobody does. It's like nobody wants these things, and nobody's ever going to want them. So yeah, just kill them all. That's the only solution. Either that or stop breeding them. But
remember those?
So that's basically Auschwitz, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
You probably remember those shelter dogs I posted in the group not too long ago. Likes to vocalize, fence required, not good with cats, doesn't like small dogs, doesn't like
Dog
kids.
will set you free.
Basically, the TLDR is we'll attack anything that moves, and it barks all the time.
Must have strong kennel, all that shit.
Yeah, need a home built to the standards of a supermax prison.
The humans often say I'm contemplating life.
Yeah.
And soundproofed.
Yes, yeah, it's soundproof. Soundproof. It's like, you wonder, like, why does that house have bars in the window? Like, you're worried about break-ins? It's like, no, I'm worried about what can break out.
Yeah, it literally says if you leave me alone, I need a strong crate I can't break out of. Are you insane?
Yeah. But yet they think this dog is adoptable. Like, that's nuts. It's too.
I don't know how people can't see through this. It's insane.
Well, too, as we, everybody's been, conditioned to believe that all dogs are, angels sent from heaven. So whatever problems this dog has, or, it just needs the right fur, F-U-R-R, forever home. And then it'll
It's
all
literally
be
what
good.
the site is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Forever
nurture
home
and
rescue.
nature.
Forever. rescue. Oh, God.
You, yeah.
That's too funny. I mean,
All
it is.
nurturing, no nature, because otherwise Hitler, Auschwitz,
Yeah.
race-based extermination.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is, yeah, we need to, tattoo a serial number on each of them and make them wear a collar with a yellow star on it. That should be first off, right?
Right.
If you put a sign over every kennel that says, what did it say? Work will set you free or something like that.
Yeah. Arbeit macht frei.
Yeah. Put that over every kennel. I mean, look, if they're going to accuse us of being Nazis, like, why not just act like them?
Exactly.
It's like, I was thinking of, and this is like really bad, talk about self-censorship. I have some meme ideas, but I probably shouldn't repeat this because you got to be careful to say stuff like that. A lot of people, even in our space, kind of find that offensive. It's getting a little bit too edgy. But I had a meme idea where you had, the Pitbull is in the gas chamber, and outside there's a cat wearing an SS uniform, like with the Darth Vader helmet and the lightning bolt insignia and all that stuff. And the cat's got its finger on a button that says gas.
Or even a poodle, because a lot of the poodle people want to get rid of the pit bulls.
Yeah, a lot of poodle people want it. Well, too, is the dog loving anti-pit bull people. I mean, I don't want to say like we came up with that term ADAP, all dogs except pits. And there's some nuance there because the problem, I mean, well, there's a lot of problems with those people, but one of them is, they send mixed messages. Like they're endlessly glorifying and promoting dogs and dog ownership. Like they're the kind of people who would push like, oh, let's save them all. Well, except for the pit bulls because they're bad, or even the dogs are people, because I've had them, in my old blog, I had a lot of dog people who would comment. And I would ask them, it's like, okay, like, do dogs have rights? And they'd be like, oh yeah, absolutely, totally. Absolutely. Same rights as humans. And I'm like, okay, but you want to ban pit bulls. And they say, oh yeah. Oh yeah, let's ban pit bulls. So you want to delete a group of people. Who else tried to do that? Now, of course, my narrative, dogs aren't people. Like pit bulls are all dog breeds, are a product of man. We created them and we can uncreate them. And it won't be the first time a dog breed died out, although typically, for example, like Cuban bloodhounds were used to hunt down escaped slaves. The pedigree Cuban bloodhound no longer exists, although a lot of that, DNA was used as sort of a, stock for other dog breeds. I don't know if the pit bulls come from them, but I think some of these other murder mutts have, part of their family tree goes back to that. So the problem is, when we do phase out a breed of murder mutt, it's only in the creation of like new breeds of murder mutts. But yeah, those people, I guess, too, is you have a dog person, a sane dog person who says, okay, I like dogs, but they're not supernatural. They're not people. They don't have rights under our legal system. Dogs and dog owners should be subject to some oversight. Yeah, that person. I mean, I have common ground with that person. You wonder, though, how far are they going to go in solving these problems? Right? Are they willing to see dog people going to jail?
If they're willing to do anything.
Good question.
Yeah. And I think, many of them aren't. They're not. Because, yeah, when the rubber meets the road, when it gets down to the, bedrock, they don't really want to do anything. The thought of, a dog person being, punished for, again, owning the wrong breed of dog, or, being held, accountable for something their dog did, makes them really uncomfortable. Like you
So
in
you're
a
saying
whole...
that,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so you're saying they just want to deflect criticism from their dogs onto someone else, but when it
Many
comes
of
to
them
brass
do.
tacks, they don't want to actually do
Yeah,
anything.
many of them do. Yeah, or they want to deflect. Many of them do. Not necessarily all of them. Many of them do. I think they realize there's a problem, but they don't want to really take the measures necessary to solve the problem or mitigate the problem. Again, they don't really want to go after other dog people, because, you could make the point too, is that you could see this as sort of you could say going after pit bulls or whatever dog breed people don't like. You could see it as part of a domino effect. It's kind of like when left-wingers complain about the top 1%. And I said, you could argue, it's like, I don't necessarily disagree with them. You could say that, relative inequality can be a problem, particularly if it's done through, if the wealth is achieved through unethical means. But here's the thing, there's always going to be a top 1%. Every society has had a top 1%, going back to probably hunter-gatherer days. So the thing is, it's like, goes back to, okay, pit bulls are the, the top 1% of problems in the dog world, but they're not the only breed of dogs that cause problems. Every breed of dog causes problems. So if we delete the pit bulls successfully, let's say we completely phase them out, they're gone. What's the next most dangerous breed of dog? What are we left with then? And what do we do about that? Do we ban that dog? Do we go after those dog owners? At least, do we punish the individuals? Or do we just ignore it? Because in my case, no, just ignoring it is not. So the problem is like, that's how some of these people present it, is they don't want to punish the deeds, only the ownership. Like you said last time, it's pre-crime. We're only going to go after the pre-crime, no post-crime. But what is the end game there? Well, the end game is like, if the only action we can take is to ban problematic dog breeds, right? We can't go after, we can't judge anybody on an individual basis. All we can do is BSL. That's it. So the end game is all dogs are banned. All of them. Because any dog can bite, any dog can bark, any dog can destroy property. Okay? Yes, I respect that some are worse than others. But there's always going to be a most dangerous or most problematic breed of dog, as long as it's even just one dog alive on Earth. Whatever that happens to be, it's one of these African Basenjis. That's the most dangerous breed of dog. So if we have a problem with that dog, do we ban them? Is that the answer? I guess. If that's all you can do. So.
Just trickle down, trickle down, trickle down.
Yep.
Ban them all.
Ban them all, because that's the end game there. If you're going to say, okay, if dog owners can't be held accountable, it's a very common narrative among those types. It's like, okay, well then we'll take whatever the most dangerous or problematic dog breed is and ban it. Gone. But what they have as the end game is there's no dogs left. They're all banned. Or we could, introduce some accountability. We could start holding dog owners responsible. Because they always say it's all in how you raise them, right? So who raised the dog to do that? like those parents in Tennessee, they should be facing murder charges. I mean, clearly they train the dogs to do that, right?
I think that would be the biggest thing is accountability, because there is
the
none.
dog rescue people can say it was just in the dog's past.
Yeah. Well, then they're accountable. Like, okay, it's like you say it's how the dog is raised or how it's trained. Find out who did that. Because that, implies intent. Somebody trained a dog to do that. I mean, that's really the opposite argument from the ADEP people. Because they claim it's all, it's what they're saying is like it's 100% the dog's fault because of the, breed genetics. And I don't, I don't discount that narrative either. Yeah, the breed background does matter. It totally matters. But the thing is, that does not get the owner off the hook. These murder mutts are not coming into our neighborhoods completely on their own. Like that idiot neighbor I have with the 3 pit bulls. She brought those dogs into this neighborhood. She owns all those bad outcomes. Fortunately, nothing really bad happened. I guess depending on how much you value the life of a cat, but at least no kids were mauled or killed, which really was just, moral luck essentially. But whatever the outcome is, there's a clear line of culpability that flows from her to what happened. You can't blame the dogs 100%. Like I Hate Dogs said, these people are accomplices. And actually, no, that's not a metaphor. They are literally accomplishing these acts, and they need to be held accountable for them. Whether, regardless of what breed restrictions are in play. So. Anyway, guys, I think I'm going to close this out. My voice is starting to go, and it was a good time, though. Good times. Maybe I'll do another one during the week, and I'll try a Skype call. I'll be following up with some info on that, because creating a Skype ID is easy. Just you probably have some, a throwaway Hotmail or Gmail ID you can use. So that should work. But anywho, I'm going to drop the call, end the call. Thanks for joining. And as always, what is it? Cleanliness is next to dogliness? No. It's people first. That's it. All right. Catch you later, guys.
Okay, see you next week.
Yep.
See you, kidder.
See ya.